We'd like to welcome Elliot Schwartz, the director at Meliorleaf, to our discussion today. And today we're really delving a little bit into looking at the debt review and debt counseling industry and the need to promote it in the proper way. And as with any industry, advertising and the message that's shared really helps define the consumer and the user of the product's expectations. So maybe we can come to you, Elliot, and just ask you a little bit about if you feel that there's a weak spot here in regard to debt review and debt counseling, and if you think certain things could be done in an improved manner. What do you think?
Well, I certainly think they can. But before we get there, I think it's also maybe interesting for the viewers to know a little bit more about me because they know me as an insurance person.
Yes.
And the reality is that I'm not really an insurance person. I'm a marketing person. I'm only very recently involved in insurance with Meliorleaf, and that came out of business development work I did for an insurance company. My own background is in management consultancy, doing business strategy and business development, which brought me to South Africa 43 years ago as a consultant, and 40 years ago full-time as marketing director of Truworths. And subsequent to the Wiltshire merger, I became the head of strategy for Woolworths. I then got involved in marketing services. I started the first through-the-lines communication agency in this country in about '83. I got bought into and bought out by a big multinational advertising agency group, JWT. I became the CEO of JWT in South Africa. I subsequently started my own advertising agency, which diversified into a marketing services group and ended up as a JSE listed marketing services group. And so I've had significant marketing experience. And as I said, my involvement in insurance grew out of business development work that I did for a major insurance company. And I'm loving it, but that's not my background. But that's why I feel that I'm in a good position to comment, perhaps as an inside outsider or an outside insider, on what I see happening in debt review and with debt counselors. And let me start by saying there's two different jobs. The first job is the positioning of the industry, why you should use a debt counselor, okay? The second job is why you should use me as your debt counselor. In other words, how do I discriminate between the different debt counselors, having established a need for debt counselors? So let's talk about the first issue. And to me, this is the paramount issue because I honestly believe that debt counselors and debt counseling, to a great extent, is fighting off the back foot, okay? At the end of the day, for reasons, many of which are historical legacies or things that are beyond our control, the understanding and the positioning of debt counseling in the market at large is not what we'd like it to be. The perceptions that people have of debt counselors, unfortunately, to a certain extent, are driven by media reporting on the odd bad apple, and every profession is going to have a bad apple, but we've done little as an industry to counter that and to create a positive perception of what we're about, why you need to use a debt counselor. People think we're expensive. People think that the end result is so long in coming, it's not worth the pain for getting there. They think a few of us are crooked, and these are things we need to address. It's not uncommon for a profession to be misperceived.
Yeah.
One of the first marketing projects I was involved with in my own communications agency, enterprise, back in the early '80s, was something called the Pharmacy Professional Awareness Campaign. Now, pharmacists are a much longer and better established group of professionals than debt counselors, but even they faced an image and perception problem. This was at a time when organizations like Clicks or supermarkets couldn't operate pharmacies, but they could sell all of the other kinds of goods, the non-prescription goods, toiletries, over-the-counter medicines, and so on and so forth, that you would find in a retail pharmacy. And what was happening was that in order to survive, the pharmacists were doing things that moved their image away from being professional advisors on the use and safety of medicines to being retailers. And unfortunately, they were perceived as second-rate retailers. The supermarkets of the world were seen to be the guys that delivered it least expensively and had the greatest choice. And what pharmacists had to offer was credit, free delivery. Those are all nice to have, but they weren't game winners. And what got lost in the process was the whole idea that the pharmacist is the only professional trained to advise you on the safe and proper use of medicines. They know more about medicines than doctors do. Even doctors make mistakes in prescribing. So, working collectively with the industry, okay, this was individual pharmacists through the association that represents pharmacists, the professional association. It was also through the retail association that represented retail pharmacies, as well as in those days, the three major wholesale groups that created branded pharmacies. So you had individual pharmacists contributing, and you had institutional and organizational pharmacists contributing to a campaign that ran 15 years. And in the first year, we changed the perception of pharmacy from one of credit and free delivery to one of professional advice. And more significantly, within 3 years, pharmacists became the most admired profession, the most respected profession. This was in studies that were done each year where we tracked. In South Africa, they rated higher than medical doctors and clergy, who came 2 and 3. Okay, so you can do a lot together collectively for a relatively small cost per person to change the perception. The toughest part of doing that is getting everybody in an industry or in a profession to buy into a common message, because everybody would like a little variation that suits them. But that's what you need to do in your own promotion of your own brand. Okay?
Yes,
The
absolutely.
first job is to create a common argument and not a laundry list of arguments, one or at most two things that distinguish the profession and why you need to use it. Okay? And that message needs to go out vociferously and consistently over time. People talk about creativity in advertising. The most creative thing you can do in advertising is be consistent. And that's the hardest thing to achieve, because we get bored with our own advertising long before consumers do. And we chop and change for the sake of change. We think that's creative. It's not. If you look at great brands, they may change the wording slightly in how they say something, but the fundamental message doesn't change. And we need to do that as an industry. Okay? Having done that, or while we're doing that, the second thing to do is for each and every individual debt counselor and debt counseling firm to position themselves within this profession. Why you should use a debt counselor should be established, but why should you use me? Okay. Now, a lot of people will think straight away that the big guys have more resources and they're better positioned to do it. And to a certain extent, that's true on a national scale. But the smaller guys tend to be more localized. Okay, they tend to be operating in a specific geography or a specific niche of the market, a certain type of client, and so on and so forth. And they can very cost effectively. And today, with digital media and so on, the ability to be much more targeted is better than it used to be when we only had mass media. Everybody needs to be going out and putting a consistent message of why you should do it with me. And it could be about, my size can be an advantage, whether I'm large or small. Big guys can say, we have helped rehabilitate more people than anybody. That's how good we are. A little guy can say, we give our clients more personal attention, and I'm the principal in this firm, and you're going to get my personal attention. With us, you're not a number, you're a name. Both are valid arguments, okay? Then you can talk about how you go about doing your business. You can't run down other debt counselors. It would be unprofessional to say someone else is lousy, but you can say our approach to debt counseling gets better results, and so on and so forth. There's nothing wrong with pointing out the way you operate as an advantage, and so on and so forth. And again, it's horses for courses. There's no one right answer. And it's not a good idea to simply laundry list lots and lots of things you can do. Okay. At the end of the day, you know, we're all passionate about what we do. We live, eat, and breathe our jobs. Okay. If we don't sell debt counseling or whatever it is that we sell, we don't eat. Okay. So we're passionate about it. But in everybody else's life, including our potential prospective clients, we take up that much space in their lives. So we don't have a lot of opportunity to go and put a laundry list of benefits out there. It's better to own one thing than to talk a lot of things and own nothing. Okay. And ultimately, what you must own is why you are different. Nobody believes before the fact of using you that you are better. You can claim you're better, but why should I believe you? Trust me, I'm better. Okay. It doesn't work. What you can get people to believe is that you do something differently, and that is plausibly better and it's worth a try. Okay. So you don't have to go out and spend a fortune reaching lots of people with lots of message. You need a simple, straightforward, focused message directed at your most likely clients. And then you need to reinforce that over time. And if you put these two things together, the industry will grow, and the better players, not the larger players necessarily, large and small, the people who intend to build their practices will gain at the expense of those who don't do anything to build their businesses. And that's healthy for the industry. It creates a higher and higher standard that others must match or beat if they want to get ahead, and everybody wins as a result. Zach, your mic is off. I don't hear you.
No, I'm turning myself back on. So absolutely, this is sound advice. And of course, there's certain parameters that we need to play within. For instance, you mentioned, in particular in South Africa, this is a legal thing that we don't take shots at our opposition. In some parts of the world, that's absolutely fine. But here, we kind of focus on ourselves and our services. We also have to bear in mind that we need to respect the national credit regulator and their branding, so that we don't just appropriate someone else's branding. And then they've also stressed that when it does come to a message, we need to be cautious about what we promise as a blanket. We don't want to say as a shotgun, you will save X amount of Rand each month or something along those lines, because of course, each individual's circumstances differ. But some of the points that
I just put in something there. There's a cliche in advertising that goes back probably 75 years that says nothing kills a bad product better than quicker than good advertising. Because advertising something you can't deliver is the best way to point out your failures.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our industry has been sensitive to that in the past, because we weren't actually advertising what we were doing. We were advertising hopes and dreams that were way beyond the kind of scope of debt review. And so a lot of people felt a little bit cheated out of things in the past. I think over time that has improved, but there's certainly a need for an industry message, a consistent industry message.
You know, for many years, it was the credit retailers that you found on the high street and in the shopping malls that dominated the furniture industry. There's reasons why that's changed. And one of the most successful players was a company called Morkel's. And I used to do advertising for Morkel's 30 years ago. Okay. And Morkel's made a virtue out of a simple promise that most retailers delivered on, which was a 2-year guarantee. Okay. Virtually every credit retailer offered a 2-year guarantee, but Morkel's went out consistently. And they didn't say the others don't offer it. All they said was Morkel's is your 2-year guarantee store. And they repeated it and they repeated it and they repeated it. And you want to know something? They ended up owning it.
Yeah.
And they were known as the 2-year guarantee store. So if a guarantee was important to you, you went to Morkel's. If it wasn't important to you, you looked elsewhere.
Yeah, and it was highly effective.
Highly effective, exactly.
And they were consistent in their message for a long period. How long would you say, if you were to guess?
They were doing, I came to South Africa as a consultant in 78. I moved here full time in 1980. I was doing their advertising probably in the mid 90s. They started the campaign long before I came to South Africa. So that campaign, or that signature line ran at least 25 years or longer.
Yeah. And so consistency, like you said, if you look at some of the largest brands in the world, when they redo their logo, for instance, you see the old logo and then you see the new logo near it, and it looks so similar. You think, wow, they spend so much money to change it, but they understand the simple principle that they can't go too far. By going too
Absolutely.
far, they actually lose their brand identity. And so
If you look at great brand logos, you don't think they've actually changed. And
yeah,
yet you can look back at history and you can see a sequence of evolution over time. The ideal, unless there's, of course, occasionally there's a time where you need to relaunch and be something different than what you were, because things become irrelevant. The world moves on. But what you always try to do in the absence of the need to make that change is to do what you've always done in a way that's relevant to the present. Okay. That's the kind of evolution that makes sense. And that will happen in the profession as well. It already has. I mean, I've been involved with debt counselors now, I don't know, 5, 6 years, 7 years since I started researching the industry for the launch of Meliorleaf. And I've seen the changes already in terms of what's important and what debt counselors can do. So the messages will change. But the fundamental underlying message should always be what contextualizes those changes.
okay. So Elliot, if I can now ask your opinion on what you think the key messages in regard to debt review are. Now, that's just your personal view. You've given it some thought, but maybe there are things that stand out for you that the industry could focus on.
Well, to me, again, there's what I call the 5-finger test. At the end of the day, people don't buy features of products. They buy benefits. Products and services are a means to an end. People don't buy the means. The means are important to the supplier because that's what effectively you manufacture in your business or your practice. But the client is only interested in what I call the 5-finger test. What's in it for me? Okay. What is the benefit? What need of mine do you satisfy? Okay. Better or differently, which implies better than anybody else. And to me, nobody wants to be in debt. Okay. And there are many ways to get out of debt. Okay. What I think the industry offers is the most certain way to rehabilitation. Okay. In other words, it's not just a matter of getting out of debt. It's a matter of changing the way you live so that you stay out of debt and that you are rehabilitated and not tainted by your past history of debt. And I think that is something that the industry itself needs to get across a lot clearer than it currently does.
I think often what happens is if we make promises that are incorrect, if we can put it that way, make promises that are perhaps focused in the wrong area, you get the wrong type of client. And the wrong type of client doesn't make your life easier. And in fact, it doesn't earn you money in the long run. It causes you a lot of hardship. And ultimately, that is the type of client who will leave the process at just the wrong time and make their own life harder. So in fact, it doesn't benefit them either.
One of the mistakes I think some debt counselors make is implying that the process is easy. I think we need to make a virtue out of the fact that the process is difficult because the benefit is quite considerable. No great benefit ever comes easy. Okay. And if you want to climb Everest, it's not easy. Okay. It's not like walking up the hill in your backyard. And that's why we don't recognize people who walk up the hill in the backyard like we recognize those who climbed Everest. So this is a tough road. What you're getting if you go into debt review is the best advice and support to take that road. Okay. If you want to successfully navigate that road, you need debt counseling.
Yeah. And you need the services of someone who can really hold your hand through
Exactly.
the process
But
and
don't
motivate
imply
you.
that it's easy. Imply that it's easier if you do it on our supported basis.
Yeah.
Much easier. Okay. You're much more likely to succeed.
Yeah.
But
And people
don't,
who enter with a high level of commitment are the most likely to finish and actually benefit from the process. Those who are entering on the barest sliver of commitment and perhaps on just some vague promises, they are doomed to fail. Let's put it that way.
yeah. It's always an issue in business around a trade-off between quality and quantity of business. We all want more business, but we also want business that sticks. Okay, people that stay with us. It's of no value to either the client or the debt counselor if people come into the process and drop out. They've wasted our time and we've wasted their time. Okay, so it's important that we get that balance right. Rather than going chasing every client, it's better to become more effective at securing and keeping the clients we really want. And that's not peculiar to debt counseling. That's true in every business.
So
True
when
in my insurance business.
Yeah, so when people make promises that are not related to debt review and then put people into the debt review process, that consumer already starts off on the back foot because they didn't come to the right place expecting the right thing. They've been whisked into a product and a service that they weren't expecting. It's not a recipe for success either.
Again, it's a general rule in advertising. In some places, the practice itself is regulated, so you can't do it too much. But people that offer unrelated incentives to get people to buy the product, okay, whether you regulate against it or not, the reality is when you're buying people's business by giving them something other than what the product is meant to deliver, the reality is you're probably going to lose that business eventually. Okay. People came to you for the incentive, not for the fundamental product or service. And unless they're there for the fundamental product or service, they're not going to stick.
Yeah. So there's a lot more on the subject that we'll get back to in the near future in a follow-up video.
Right.
But we want to thank you very much for giving us some insight with your background in the industry and of course your previous background in marketing. It's really helpful. Thank you, Elliot.
Pleasure.